Mike Edwards is released. The Bills don't make any trades at the deadline. And what's going on with Dalton Kincaid this season? We're going to break it all down for you here today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, folks, welcome in. Got a bunch of stuff to do here on the podcast. We'll have two segments of Herd Mentality where we dive into the AFC landscape, some of the Bills' pass rush issues, Dalton Kincaid, and kind of checking in on his sophomore season. But we start with what happened and didn't happen yesterday as the trade deadline came and went. The Bills didn't make any trades, but there were some roster moves, and there's some roster moves for us to, well, I guess, predict. Let's talk about it. So the Bills do have two open roster spots right now. One courtesy of Mike Edwards getting released. The other courtesy of Dawuane Smoot going to injured reserve. Let's talk about these moves and then kind of get into what the Bills didn't do at the trade deadline. So Mike Edwards, safety, released. Kind of an unfortunate situation. The Bills signed him to a one-year deal. Has been a good third safety for the Chiefs, and the Bucs got a chance to start a lot of games due to injury. And as a sub-package player, he got on the field a good amount. I liked him a lot. I thought he had good ball skills. I thought he was versatile. I thought he was a good tackler. And I was excited to see what he could do in a starting role in Buffalo. But obviously, it wouldn't come together. He asked for his release. The Bills tried to trade him. Couldn't get anything for him. Winds up getting released. Had a source reach out to me about 2 weeks ago and said, hey, look, I hear you talking about Mike Edwards. You're confused. Let me tell you what's going on. And Mike was not happy that he had to compete for a starting role in Buffalo. He didn't appreciate that he had to compete with Damar Hamlin, who didn't do anything in 2023 and is on a rookie deal, and Cole Bishop. Didn't have the right attitude. Didn't give great effort in practice. And that's why he was inactive and a non-factor in the Bills' safety position. In Buffalo, everything's earned. Mike Edwards didn't appreciate that. And so he's gone. Now, obviously, the idea of Mike Edwards was intriguing, but obviously didn't do anything. So it's not like a big loss. He was mostly inactive this season. So where does that leave the Bills at safety? Well, they still have a pretty good depth player in Cam Lewis. That would be the third safety. Cole Bishop, as the second-round rookie, is still around. But don't forget about what the Bills have on the practice squad in Kareem Jackson, a veteran that's played a lot of football, and Lewis Cine, who's a young player that has some level of upside as a recent first-round pick. So I don't really look at the Bills' safety position and feel any differently about it. I think the real story here is it's unfortunate that Mike Edwards couldn't compete and be the player that I was hopeful that he could be in Buffalo. And Sean McDermott said as much, that they brought him in and thought he had a chance to start, planned on giving him starter reps in OTAs. He was not available as he worked back from a shoulder injury. He gets a chance to be the starter in training camp. He has a hamstring injury, never really proved himself, which has led to some speculation, or the continued speculation, or the intensified speculation of Micah Hyde. And obviously the door's not shut there. The Bills continue to say that, but we'll see. You know, it's a complicated situation there. It's not like Micah Hyde played great football last year, right? I think that's kind of the piece of this equation, in addition to his own neck issues and, the stingers that kept on piling up end of last year. So I don't know what the appetite is there. I don't know if Micah Hyde wants to play. But there's some Bills beat reporters that have a level of confidence that Micah Hyde could be on the way into town. Stay tuned. We'll see. Is 2023 Micah Hyde better than 2024 Damar Hamlin? I think it's worth talking about. I know that Micah Hyde brings leadership. There's certainly that piece of the equation, but I think when you insert Micah Hyde into the conversation, you're not talking about Micah Hyde from 3 or 4 years ago, right? So I think there's some complications there. I'm not fully convinced that he comes in and represents an upgrade. I'm certainly curious. But I do like the way that Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin are kind of growing together as the season moves along. So I think that's a complicated situation. But the Bills have one roster spot courtesy of Mike Edwards no longer being on the team. They have another roster spot because Dawuane Smoot is headed to injured reserve. Wrist injury. You're going to miss a bunch of time, obviously. Certainly makes for a more thin situation at defensive end. The Bills still have Greg Rousseau and A.J. Epenesa and Von Miller. They have Casey Tuhill. They have Javon Solomon all in the mix. And, of course, I'm not sure if Casey Tuhill's knee injury is something of concern. We'll hear from Sean McDermott later in the day on Wednesday. But Dawuane Smoot, I think, was kind of an important player. He starts, first of all, he's a starter for the team. And I know he's a big part of their third down package with how he can kick inside and rush. And so we'll see how the Bills respond to that. Of course, it leaves an open roster spot. I'm hopeful that Eli Ankou gets one of those spots. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me based on the need that the Bills have for a run-stopping defensive lineman, what he's shown in 2 games, what he's shown throughout his career in Buffalo. Familiar player. He's been around for a while. I don't know what more he can do to earn a spot, and certainly the Bills have a need there. It's also worth mentioning that 2 former Bills defensive tackles were released on Tuesday. Jordan Phillips, who started the year with the Giants, then he went to the Cowboys, and now he's been released from the Cowboys, who need defensive tackles. I don't get excited about Jordan Phillips. I mean, I thought he was a wreck his last year in Buffalo. 350-pound dude that really is terrible against the run, that occasionally can shoot a gap and rush the passer. I don't know. He doesn't really inspire me to be excited about that. And if he comes to the Bills, I hope it's on the practice squad. And then the other one's Quentin Jefferson, who I'm much more interested in than Jordan Phillips. Quentin Jefferson, I think, has some legit pass rush ability, and I think is a worthy player of 20-25% of the snaps. So he would be interesting to me if the Bills did bring in a former Bills defensive tackle. But obviously we'll stay tuned and we'll respond to anything that happens. So 2 open roster spots, we'll see. The other piece here is that the Bills didn't make a trade at the deadline. Now, don't forget, they did trade for Amari Cooper. That's not nothing. And credit to the Bills. They did that sooner than right now. So the Bills have now entered week 3 of Amari Cooper as opposed to, oh, well, welcome to Buffalo. So let's not act like they didn't do anything. They did trade for Amari Cooper, and that's a pretty big deal. But I like many, was hopeful that the Bills would add to the defensive line. And we'll talk more about the pass rusher, some good herd mentality questions coming up on the other side of the break here. That's coming in just a few minutes. But I think what this really goes back to is, yeah, outside help would be nice, right? I would have been in favor of a trade. And certainly I can point to 3 trades that I would have made. Preston Smith for a 7, I would have done that for sure. Za'Darius Smith and a 7 for a 5 and a 6. Yeah, I'd have done that in a heartbeat. The Lions get that done with the Browns. And then Baron Browning goes from the Broncos to the Cardinals for a 6. I would have done any one of those 3 trades without hesitation. And in the case of Za'Darius Smith, I might beat that. I might say, here's 2 5s, or I would have probably beat that deal. I don't know how important it was for Cleveland to send him to the NFC, but I don't think that's really a thing because they sent Amari Cooper to the Bills. So, yeah, I would have done that for sure. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, especially with the Dawuane Smoot injury, and it would have made sense to me. So I think that's step 1. And you start to be critical of a general manager saying, hey, you didn't make a deal. What deals did happen that you would have done? Well, here's 3 of them. I'd have done any of these. But I think what this really comes back to is Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones need to make more of an impact. Yes, bring the outside help. I want that. More importantly, can we get the expected impact from Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones? Because that's really what this team is missing. Now, there's some scheme stuff that the Bills can do. I'll talk about that later in the episode. But yeah, it's a little disappointing to not get some defensive line help, especially when there was some deals that I certainly would have done. But Oliver and Jones just need to make more of an impact. And obviously, with Von Miller back, I'm certainly interested and somewhat excited about how he can reacclimate himself to the defense and make an impact. I think that certainly helps. But Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones need to do the thing that they're here to do, and that's make more plays than what they've shown so far through 9 games this season. All right, herd mentality coming up on the other side of it. A lot of questions this week. I mean, like an overwhelming amount of questions about Dalton Kincaid and his sophomore season. We will get into that here in just a moment. Be sure to stick with me. Hey, Bills Mafia, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Well, they're back and have added an amazing new game mode I need to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a new head coach career mode. So on top of building your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring your coaching staff, you also get to call offensive plays during games. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgraded negotiation systems. So this fun and realistic game just got a lot better. If you already have it installed, be sure to update it so you could try out the new mode. If you don't have it yet, download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. I love it, and I know you will too. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com, ultimate-gm.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM, start your dynasty today. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Here's what you do. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. I personally love that Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks also now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this season. So download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, folks, let's get into some herd mentality questions. First one here comes from Harry, comes from Put Steve Tasker in the Hall of Fame. A lot of people, I mean, like I would say at least 6 people sent me an email, sent me a text message through the text line and said, we got to talk about Dalton Kincaid in his sophomore season. So let me read the question from Harry, and I also want to add the question from Put Steve Tasker in the Hall of Fame, what they said to me. Harry says, curious to get your thoughts on Dalton Kincaid's season. It felt like last year when I'd watch your all 22 breakdowns, you would highlight Kincaid multiple times per game. This season doesn't seem to have the same vibe. Do you think we're witnessing a true sophomore slump? Put Steve Tasker in the Hall of Fame said, I did some research, and Kincaid's been pretty underwhelming so far in 2024. He ranks 18th in yards per game amongst tight ends, 13th in receptions per games, and has a catch percentage of it's 38th among tight ends. He said, I can appreciate that the Bills have adopted the everybody eats mentality, pushing Kincaid's yards per game and receptions per game down, but that wouldn't explain the poor catch percentage. Thoughts? All right, so first of all, on Harry's question about highlighting Dalton Kincaid in the all-22 clips that I send out to people in our Substack, you're right. I did do a lot more of that last year. He was also a rookie, first-round pick last year, so I certainly had a lot of like burden to do that and share a lot more of it. And And so that just hasn't been as high of a priority to me, where I think more of what I've tried to show is Josh Allen's decision-making, Keon Coleman run scheme, right? So it's a little bit of emphasis there. And Kincaid still plays football the way that I would teach my son to play football if I had one, with everything he does in terms of effort and chasing the ball and bringing a lot of energy to the table. And he's a very talented football player. Kind of digging into the season in general, I'll agree. I expected more production from Dalton Kincaid. I think I've on record of saying I think he should be the number one option in this passing game, should have 120 targets, and he's not quite on that pace. He's on pace for somewhere in the mid-90s in terms of targets this season. I think when you measure his production against other tight ends, you gotta be mindful of where these tight ends are. Right now, Dalton Kincaid, there are 21 tight ends in the NFL within 100 yards of him. So I think he has 332 yards. So if you go from 232 to 432, there's 21 tight ends. I mean, there's a very, very, very small margin. So like when you say he's 18th in yards per game, I mean, if he would have like one more catch, that he might be 10th, right? I mean, it's just not a whole lot that I would say in terms of the raw production really telling the story. I think early on in the season, when I say people, opposing teams certainly knew that Kincaid was going to be a big part of this equation, and there was a lot of gravity that he absorbed, right? There was a lot of emphasis on Kincaid, where it just was very difficult to think about throwing him the football because of how much coverage he was able to bring. And obviously at the same time, Keon Coleman, it's his first few games. You don't have Amari Cooper at this point. All the newness around Josh Allen early in the season. And so that coincides with, all right, everyone's paying attention to Dalton Kincaid. I love that we are seeing more down the field stuff this year. Dalton Kincaid is 10th in average depth of target among tight ends, which is exciting. That's where I want to see him landing, because I do think he's a good intermediate deep threat at the tight end position. And he's been really, really, really good in terms of yards after catch. 8th in the NFL among tight ends and yards after catch at 6.4 yards after catch per reception. So there are some good things happening here. And I don't think there's a talent issue here. I think it's just a matter of this offense kind of fully coming together, in particular the passing game. Let me give you some metrics here that I think will be eye-opening for you, that I think tell the story. Like whenever these questions started to come through, I started to think to myself, okay, what is this? And in my mind, I thought to myself, it just doesn't feel like him and Josh are connecting the way that I was hoping that they would at this point. And I found some data that absolutely supports that idea. So this information comes courtesy of the Fantasy Points data suite. I trust it implicitly. I talk to Brett Whitefield, who is in charge of that data suite every single day. And I know his process. It's very, very good. And I believe every piece of data that comes out of the Fantasy Points data suite. So he has 11 targets that are uncatchable. 11 targets. That's the most of any tight end in the NFL. So that's a big deal. And I'm not saying that he should catch all 11 of them, but if he caught half, that's, again, the margins are very slim when you want to talk about the 18th tight end and the 10th tight end. There's not a whole lot that separates them in terms of production. The average depth of targets on those 11 uncatchable targets, 15.1 yards. That's meaningful. Very meaningful. 7 of those 11 targets that were uncatchable, he was the first read in the progression. The ball's supposed to go to him. Wasn't catchable. 166 air yards. These are all number one amongst tight ends. And he's still getting separation. Among 60 tight ends with at least 50 routes run this year, he's 7th highest in win rate as a route runner. Him and Josh got to get it going a little bit more, right? Like that's what's got to happen. That's the difference between us saying, oh, Dalton Kincaid's having a great second season, and oh, is he having a sophomore slump? Like these margins are so slim. I think they have to get it going a little bit more. I think that one thing that I would say about Josh and his placement to Kincaid, I feel like he's consistently down the field trying to lead him, where I think you don't have to necessarily have like the perfect throw. He can make good adjustments. I think they just got to get it going a little bit more. I think it's a chemistry thing for Josh and Dalton, as there's expectations for what this duo is supposed to be this year with all the other new things that are happening in this offense. I think they're close on a lot of stuff. still a really young player. Remember all the conversations that we've had in the past about how slow developing tight ends are? Well, Dalton's coming off of a historic rookie season, and certainly that creates a lot of momentum and hype and expectation for year 2 to be huge, right? And I certainly had an expectation of that. I'm looking for this to crank up here down the stretch. But as I think about why, I don't really think it's anything that Dalton Kincaid is incapable of. The talent is obvious. I think that him and the quarterback have to get going in terms of chemistry a little bit more, and then just kind of solidifying what this passing offense is going to be. And I think that's been the bigger challenge, as I still feel like throughout the year, it's already kind of changed when you insert an Amari Cooper and you're expecting a lot out of Keon Coleman, and it's still coming together in a lot of ways. So I'm looking for this to kind of crank up, and hopefully this provides some good context as to the situation. Again, I expected more. I'm not disagreeing with anybody that didn't think that there would be more production for Kincaid, but I do think the margins are slim. And then I think you look at a lot of those, I mean, not a lot, the highest uncatchable amount of targets of any tight end in the NFL, and they're down the field on their first read, and the production that's not there. And at the same time, Kincaid's winning at a high level as a route runner, right? There's just more, and I think it will come together. Papa T says, does the amount of stress that the Bills put on the defensive line for run fits limit their ability to rush the passer? Never played defensive line, but even in an obvious pass rush situation, is it hard mentally for players to flip that switch? I don't think mentally it should be. I mean, obviously, as a defensive lineman, you're reading the set of an offensive tackle or an offensive lineman, and that tells you what to do. You either rush the passer or you defend the run. I don't know that there should be any mental challenges there. I think there are a couple of things that come to mind here as we wish that the Bills' pass rush was a little bit more effective right now. First of all, I think Bobby Babich needs to have more of an appetite to blitz, do more to help your pass rush. Right now, he's relying a lot on organic pass rush. The Bills have good blitzers in a Taron Johnson, in a Taylor Rapp, in a Terrell Bernard. I would certainly tap into that a little bit more to stress protection schemes more. But then the other thing is that I think is lost in this conversation is that the rotation that the Bills typically use, not quite as much, right? You're seeing 3 players in particular play a lot of snaps. Greg Rousseau is playing 72% of snaps. That's 12% higher than any other season. A.J. Epenesa is playing 57% of snaps. His previous high was 41%. So that's, I'm terrible at math, but is that 16% higher than any other season? Ed Oliver's playing 68% of snaps now. He played 72% last year, but prior to that, never above 60%. And I don't think we're being mindful enough of the hamstring injury that caused him to miss some time, and maybe he's not fully back from. So, yeah, I think your rotation is a little bit more thin, and so you're asking your best players to play more snaps, and I think that takes away from the overall freshness of them. And then I think Bobby Babich needs to have more of an appetite to blitz and be creative with pressure looks to help free up some matchups and maybe get some free runners and go that way. So that's kind of my thoughts on maybe some reasons why the pass rush hasn't been as good. I don't know that it's because of structurally how the Bills defend the run. There's a lot on them. But I think that's supposed to be somewhat offset by the rotation, which isn't quite as consistent as it's been based on those 3 guys playing that many snaps. And I do think that more of an appetite to blitz makes a lot of sense to me. All right, coming up on the other side of it, I want to talk about the AFC landscape, audibles, and more. Be sure to stick with me. Get ready to tackle the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch in the and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, folks, a few more questions to get to here today. The next one from Chris. Chris says, when I was watching the game today, referring to the Sunday game against the Dolphins, it seemed like Josh was calling alert a lot and audibling to another play. I've seen them do this before many times, but during the Dolphins game, it seemed like they were doing it a lot more than I'm used to seeing. My question is it a good thing for the offense to be audibling that much during a game? I like Josh and Brady. I like having Josh and Brady able to see how the defense is lining up and adjusting the play. It just seemed like they were doing it every other play against Miami, and I wasn't sure if it's a good thing, a bad thing, or a neutral thing. Yeah, this is a very, very, very good thing. And this speaks to having a veteran quarterback like Josh Allen. You got to have, in my opinion, you got to have a quarterback that can get your team out of bad plays and into good plays, right? Take a look at how the defense is aligning and realize, hey, do we got the right stuff here or do we got the wrong stuff? And if it's the wrong stuff, get yourself into the right stuff. That's big. And Josh Allen at this point in his career, and he's been here for a while, this isn't new. Yeah, to be able to look at the defense and alert, get into the right play, that's big. And one thing with Miami, in terms of their defensive identity is that they play a lot of different defenses. They mix up their looks probably more than any team in the league. And that's going to lead to more alerts at the line of scrimmage because on a snap-to-snap basis, they're so different. So I think that plays into why the frequency was a lot higher against Miami. Also, I mean, sometimes you come out of a huddle, you have two plays called, and Josh gets up there, and it's like, okay, I gotta make sure the other 10 guys here know the play I want to run here. And sometimes it could be just as simple as changing the direction of the run play. You get up there, we're going to run zone left. All right, we like the bubble over here better. Alert. And then you say something that tells everybody that it's going to be to the right instead of the left. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. But a quarterback taking the time to get the offense into what he believes is the right play against that defense, to me, that's never a bad thing. Jason says, what are your thoughts on this year's AFC playoff picture? If you had to pick them today to finish 1 through 7, how would you stack them? And of the wild card contenders, who would you like to see the Bills face and who would scare you? Yeah, the AFC landscape is very fascinating to me. I think the wild card race is really, really, really interesting where, I mean, you only have 9 teams within one game of 500. You have 6 teams that are 3-6 or worse. Very much the haves and the have-nots. So right now, it's the Chiefs are the 1 seed, the Bills are the 2, Steelers 3, Texans 4, Ravens 5, Chargers 6, Broncos 7. Colts are 4 and 5. The 8 seed, the Bengals are 4 and 5, the 9 seed. So I think the Chiefs are obviously going to win the West. I think they're going to be the 1 seed. They're 8-0. They're 2 games up on any team. I think that the Bills have a chance to be the 2 seed so long as they can have a better record than the Texans and Ravens. I'm way more concerned about the Ravens than I am the Texans because obviously the Bills don't have those tiebreakers. But obviously the Texans are going to win that division. But I do think you're going to have an interesting battle between the Steelers and the Ravens to win the North. So I think your top 4 seeds are going to be some order of the Chiefs, Bills, Texans, and then the winner of the North and the Steelers and the Ravens. So that means I think the 5 seed is reserved for whoever's second in the North. And then I think that your other 2 playoff teams are going to be the Chargers and the Bengals. I think ultimately the Broncos will fall off. I think the Broncos have a good defense, but I mean, come on, it's still a rookie quarterback. They're going to have their issues down the stretch. And I don't look at the Colts or the Jets as a team that's going to get in there. So I think you're going to have the 5 seed being the Ravens or the Steelers. I think the 6 and the 7 is going to be the Chargers or the Bengals. And they play head-to-head pretty soon, and I think that's going to matter a lot in sorting out who the 6 and the 7 is going to be. In terms of who I would want to play and not want to play in terms of the wild card round, obviously I don't want to play Baltimore. And I don't want to play Joe Burrow either. So give me a world where the Bills host the Steelers or they host the Chargers. I think that would be the most ideal. And then from there, you deal with whatever you have to deal with. But I think, honestly, I feel like I'd be really surprised if it wasn't the Chargers, Bengals, and then whoever is number 2 in the AFC North to be the playoff field in terms of the wild cards, along with the Chiefs, Texans, Bills, and winner of the North. I think you could stick a knife in the Jets, Titans, Dolphins, Browns, Jaguars, Raiders, and Patriots. We'll play all the games. We'll see what happens, but that's kind of my thought. James says, if Buffalo is more focused on Kansas City, San Francisco, Detroit, and possibly the Rams, can Indy be a true trap game? Indy ran all over us last time. If they watch the Baltimore game this year, how we got exposed, they will see how bad we defend the run and do it again to us. I don't know. Listen to yesterday's podcast, please. Beane needs to get us D-line and defensive end help before the deadline. Obviously, that didn't happen, and Babbage needs to quit running nickel and dime. No, come on. What is this question? Structurally change the defense that's been wildly successful for you as an organization? Yeah, James, you got to listen to yesterday's podcast. I explained this very, very well. But here's what I want to say to James's question. I don't get any sense ever that the Bills are thinking ahead about anything. Very much week to week, very much focused on what they have to do that week. So I don't think that the Bills are going to be saying, oh, we play the Chiefs in 2 weeks and the 49ers in 4 weeks, and come on. They're focused on beating the Colts. If they lose to the Colts, it won't be because, well, we didn't try hard enough in this game because we're focused on Kansas City. I don't think that'll be true at all. Am I concerned about Jonathan Taylor? Yeah. And I'll have more to share about the Colts later in the week after I study the Colts more. But I will say that the first 2 years of Jonathan Taylor's career, a lot different than the last 3. And that offensive line has some injuries. And I think the Bills' defense matches up quite well with everything else on the Colts offense in terms of who their quarterback's going to be in Flacco, big physical receivers. They have offensive line injuries. So, if your main focus is Jonathan Taylor, okay, get that done, right? So I think the matchup otherwise really helps. And I think the Colts have some unique challenges with their front on defense that'll be interesting to break down the rest of the week. But this is, man, all I can say is go back and listen to the second segment of yesterday's All 22 Review podcast to really understand structurally what the Bills do defensively. And it's a tried and true recipe, and the Bills get a lot of praise for how they can function out of nickel and what that means for their overall ability to play defense. Yeah, there's going to be moments. There's going to be moments where the Bills are going to give up some rushing production. But it's a tried and true situation where, there's just, you would rather a team run the ball on you than have explosive plays in the passing game. So you want to do the thing that's most correlative to winning. And the Bills are very much interested in doing it that way. And a big part, anytime that the Bills lose because of rushing production, the missing part of the equation is that they don't score enough points on offense. Their offense, that's usually the piece, right? There is some level of belief that they can score, right? That's part of their recipe. And I think that's smart. When you think about how do you optimize the functionality of your team based on what you have and what you don't have to win football games, being able to structurally play defense in such a way that complements your offense because you have Josh Allen makes a lot of sense to take away the things that are most correlative to scoring points for an opposing offense. Listen to yesterday. That's all I'll say. All right, folks. Thanks for being here. Moving forward, we focus our attention to the Colts. Crossover Thursday, the primer, the final thoughts, all of that's coming your way. Don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you take a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Folks, have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.